What are three ways to solve problems in consulting? Hi everyone, my name is Johannes Niari. I'm a strategy consultant, and on this channel, I want to help you to learn the necessary skills in your first years of your consulting career to have a successful career, but also to live a balanced life. And today, I want to talk about three ways to solve problems in consulting. And I remember when I started my career and when I was new to consulting and learned about problem solving, I was taught the hypothesis driven approach. And this means that you formulate hypotheses and then throughout the project you test hypotheses. And this is a very legit approach that you can use many times and very often. But the big issue is that you have to know a lot about the problem, about the situation, in order to apply or to formulate these hypotheses. So I needed a frame for situations where I didn't know a lot about the problem, and also I needed a frame for more agile approaches, because especially at the beginning of my career, I did a lot of product development, digitization projects, and here you need more agile approaches to solve problems. Well, the solution for that was when came to me when I read the book Cracked It, because in the book Cracked It, they don't only talk about the hypothesis-driven approach, but they also introduce some other types of problem solving that really helped me to solve this issue and to have a set of problem solving approaches that I could use in various situations. And what I want to do today in this video is to talk about three approaches to solve problems, and these are really the approaches that I use in my daily work in strategy consulting. Before we talk about the three ways to solve problems, let's talk about problem solving in consulting in general. Well, as you know, we as consultants, we are hired to solve problems. So the company, the client, they have a business problem, then they hire a consulting team, and then the consulting team develops a solution for the client. And within this project, and where you come up with it, or where you try to develop the solution, you typically have three phases. And this is applicable to almost every consulting project that you have. And phase number one is that you structure the problem, that you try to understand the situation, that you try to break the problem down into its various components. The second step is that you analyze the problem. So this is where you conduct all of your analysis. This is where you do all your calculations and really try to understand the problem to develop the solution. And then the step number three is that you communicate the solution. And very often this is where you have your presentations at the end, where you introduce your client to your solution and to your analysis. Well, this is the overall frame, but the three ways to solve problems, they tackle the question how you structure the problem and how you analyze it. Okay, so these first two steps in your general problem solving approach, this is what we are talking about now. And the first way to solve problems is the hypothesis driven approach, and this is what I want to talk about first today. So the hypothesis driven approach, this is an approach that you can use if you already have a solution in mind. So this means, often your own company, depending on what kind of firm you're working for, but very often, they have a certain expertise in a certain field, and they already have conducted many projects. So typically, if you're confronted with such a type of problem that your company has solved many times before, then it's very applicable that you use this hypothesis-driven approach, because you already have a lot of know-how and can develop these hypotheses. And if we talk about strategy consulting, then this is typically, stuff like cost-cutting projects, like revenue improvement cost projects, transformation projects, restructuring projects. These kind of projects that are really at the core of strategy consulting. But of course, if you're working for another type of firm, then these are probably different problems or different project types that we are talking about here. So how do you apply the hypothesis-driven approach? Well, it always starts with step number one, that you write down your hypothesis. So this means that you take a look at a company and that you develop some hypothesis for the solution. So let's say, the company wants to reduce cost, and then you can already formulate your hypothesis where you say probably, SG&A costs are too high, then probably your production costs are too high, quality is not good enough and causes costs, and so on. And then you have a long list of hypotheses. And then within the analysis phase, you try to think about, okay, how can you test these hypotheses? And then you conduct the analysis in order to test your hypothesis, and then you confirm some hypothesis, and then you reject some hypothesis. In this entire process, at the end, you have a set of confirmed hypotheses, and this is the solution, and this is the end result that you have with the hypothesis-driven approach. And this is basically how you do it, and this is the, I would say, basic approach, and in most of the consulting projects, this is the way how you do it. And it has a certain pros and cons. Well, the pros are definitely that this is the most efficient approach that you have to solve problems, because you straight come out with the hypothesis and then you just test them. This is all of course very efficient and very time effective. The big con is that you mostly have kind of standard solutions, because you don't really think outside the box, because you already come in with a set of proven hypotheses that you have from other industries. So you don't really come up with creative solutions, but nevertheless, this is a fast and efficient approach, and this is what you use in most cases. Well, but then there is this second approach I want to talk about, and this is the issue tree driven path. And sometimes you don't have a solution in mind. Okay, in the hypothesis driven approach, you already know or have a kind of idea what the solution is, because you have a certain expertise and have this tackled this kind of problem many times before. But what if you don't have these hypotheses at the beginning? And this is often the case if you don't have much experience in a certain field. If you have a problem that your company has not solved many times before, still of course you want to find a proper solution for the business problem. And this could be, for example, if we talk about a strategy consulting firm, that you want to increase profitability, maybe in an unknown industry, maybe in an unknown setting. Maybe your focus is on the SG&A functions in your company, but then of course then suddenly you have to analyze the production department or something like that. Okay, and then you don't have this proven set of hypotheses. What you then do is that you start with drawing out an issue tree, and this means that you break down the big problem into its components. Okay, so let's take increasing profitability, for example. Then you would break down profitability into its components, and this means on the one hand, of course, all the revenue drivers, on the other hand, all of the cost drivers. And then you try to create this structure, and along this structure you try to develop the hypothesis. And then the rest is the same. You have this hypothesis, then you do the analysis, you try to test it, and then at the end you come to your solution. And the big difference to the hypothesis-driven approach is that you start with that issue tree, that you try to lay out the structure before, and this structure helps you, even in an unknown situation, to come up with valid hypothesis, because you have this kind of structure, and are able to develop the hypothesis that you need to test. The pros and the cons are the following. I think the big pro is that this is the most comprehensive approach, because obviously if you lay down the structure, if you really take a step back to draw out, or to think about all the possible solutions that you have, or all the possible issues that you could tackle, this of course is very comprehensive, and gets you a broad variety of hypotheses. But the big con, of course, is that it takes a lot of time, because if you draw out this issue tree, then very often it gets kind of very complex. Then you have a lot of hypotheses, and in contrast to the hypothesis-driven approach, this takes much more time, because in the hypothesis-driven approach, you already have these hypotheses. You already know from previous projects what kind of issues you want to tackle. So it takes more time, but also it's more comprehensive. Well, the third way of solving problems is the design thinking driven path. And this approach is very suitable if you, again, don't have the solution in mind, but also if you don't have the structure that you could use to build an issue tree. And very often, you have this kind of setting in agile approaches, or in digitalization projects, or in innovation projects. And because there you don't have a fixed structure, you try to come up with a solution, where you don't already know at the beginning what the end result should be. And this is a more agile and more iterative approach that you use also in consulting. So typical projects would be new product development. It could be business development. It could be coming up with digitalization ideas, something like that. Where you want to have this kind of iterative and more agile approach. The way you do it is that you have several phases. First of all, you start with the exploration. This means that you try to understand a little bit, the situation. This is, that you get familiar with the setting. And then you start, with a kind of creative ideation, so that you try to think about things that you can do in your first phase. Then you do prototyping and testing, and then you do a lot of iterations. And the basic idea behind this is that you have the exploration, then you have the ideation, and then you prototype, type and test. And after that, you get some feedback from the client. Maybe, if you want to develop a new product, or, you test your business model in the market, something like that. And then you adjust your procedure and go to the next phase, where you again, do the exploration, the ideation, then the prototyping and the testing. And with each circle, with each phase, you get more experience. And in an iterative step-by-step approach, you get to the solution at the end. So what is the big pro? What is the big con? The big pro, of course, is that you have this kind of iterative, agile approach in close collaboration with, for example, the client. And this typically, helps you to get very client or market-oriented solutions. Well, the big con, of course, is that you don't already know at the beginning where you're ending up. And sometimes, of course, this leads to a situation where you don't really have a result, or where the result is, that this product idea, is not valid, for example. And of course, this comes with a lot of insecurity, and especially in the consulting setting, where people spend a lot of money for consultants. This approach has certain risks, especially if your company or if the client, is not used to agile approaches. Then there are certain risks, but nevertheless, this is how you typically do it if you have more agile approaches in new product development, new business development, and stuff like that. So if you like that, then please leave a thumb up and subscribe to this channel to learn more about consulting skills. Also, if you're interested in learning all the skills that you need for your first years, then check out the link below. There I have a free masterclass that helps you to learn the skills that you need for consulting. And with that being said, I want to thank you for your time, and I wish you a great day. Hope to talk to you soon, and goodbye, Johannes.